Lucille arrived at the law firm wearing the nicest outfit she owned, one she had bought 6 years ago at a thrift store, and shoes that pinched her calluses. As soon as she walked in, she was taken to a private room. The lawyer, a distinguished man with graying hair, stood up respectfully. "Please, have a seat, Mrs. Carter." She obeyed. The man opened a leather folder and pulled out a sealed envelope. "Mr. William Matthews left this will 6 months ago. It was handwritten, witnessed, and notarized. I'll read only the part that concerns you." Lucille felt her heart pounding against her ribs. He unfolded the paper, adjusted his glasses, and began. "The only person who stood by me in my final years was Lucille Carter. She was more than a caregiver. She was a friend, a confidant, a light in the darkness. Therefore, I leave her the entirety of my estate, accounts, properties, and investments, as of today valued at $95 million. Silence. Time stopped. Lucille thought she had misheard. 95 million? She looked at the lawyer, then at her own hands. The hands that had changed adult diapers, that had made soup, that had cleaned up vomit. The hands of a poor woman, now heir to nearly $100 million. Lucille Carter was 50 years old and had more worry lines than age lines. Widowed, single mother, black, poor, invisible. She had been working as an in-home caregiver since she was 33 after her husband died in a construction accident. Back then, her son Elliot was still in diapers, and she had no idea how she would put food on the table the next day. But there was one thing she always knew how to do: care. She used to say that caring was a gift, and she did it with her whole heart. Never for the reward, always for the soul. When she started caring for old Mr. Matthews, he was bitter and distant, a former railroad tycoon. He lived alone in a dark mansion, filled with sad paintings and dust-covered furniture. No one visited him. No friends, no relatives, not even the neighbors knew if he was still alive. He had money, but no affection. And then Lucille came in. On the first day, she arrived with a bouquet of sunflowers to bring some light into this house. Matthews didn't even look at her, but she left the vase on the table, and every week she replaced it with fresh flowers. In the first few months, he barely spoke, complained about the food, pretended to sleep so he wouldn't have to talk. Lucille heard it all and responded with kindness. Every morning, she brought him coffee and bagels exactly the way he liked. Every night, she kissed him on the forehead, even when he pretended not to feel it. Over time, his silence gave way to stories. He told her about his youth, about a woman he had loved and lost, about a son he might have had, but never knew. And Lucille listened, with attentive eyes, without interrupting, without judging. She wasn't just a caregiver. She was presence. She was peace. And he knew it. That morning, Lucille had no idea she would become a millionaire. During the conversation with the lawyer, she couldn't quite grasp what was happening. I don't understand. He never said anything to me." "He used to say you were the only person he trusted," the lawyer replied. Lucille left the office in a daze. The sunlight hit her face like a punch. The streets looked different. The sky seemed higher. But inside, everything was still the same. She took the bus back home, with the will folded in her pocket, and a secret bigger than anything she had ever known. She didn't want to buy mansions or go splurging on designer clothes. For now, the money would remain silent. She wouldn't tell anyone, That night, Elliot came home with a sparkle in his eyes. "Mom, I have something to tell you." Lucille hid her exhaustion and gave him a smile. "Me too, son." But he interrupted her, excited. "I'm getting married. Allison said yes." Lucille felt the ground vanish beneath her for a moment. Allison, the rich, arrogant girl who barely acknowledged her during the rare times they met, the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in town, who had never even looked Lucille in the eyes. Wow, that's wonderful news. She swallowed hard. Would it be right to tell him about the inheritance at a moment like this? No. She wanted to see. She wanted to know who would still treat her with respect, while the world still saw her as poor. And so, Lucille kept the secret, locked the truth away, and decided to quietly observe the preparations for her son's wedding, without anyone knowing that the invisible woman in the corner carried a fortune that could change every life in that mansion. But what she didn't know yet was that the greatest test of dignity was about to begin, and that true poverty wasn't hers. The car jolted along the dirt road as if it hesitated to take her there. Lucille gazed out the window as the countryside stretched for miles. Wildflowers, rolling green hills, and in the distance, the Lancaster family mansion, Allison's parents' estate. The house wasn't just huge, it was intimidating. Windows like eyes, walls as white as ice, a symbol of everything she had never had. And now, the place where her son would be married. Lucille clutched her small beige purse, holding documents and the dress she had sewn herself. A simple dress, but honest. Just like her. She arrived with a smile, but it faded at the entrance. Allison didn't even give her a hug. "Oh, hi. Glad you could make it." Cold, robotic. And she walked off immediately, barking orders to the decorators. In the main hall, the bride's parents, bridesmaids, and friends were gathered. Conversations about European vacations, designer handbags, and apartments in Manhattan. Lucille approached shyly, but the moment she opened her mouth to greet them, one of Allison's aunts murmured, "Oh, is she the help?" Lucille smiled, not correcting her. Elliot, caught up with his friends, didn't notice. She didn't want to interrupt. So, a housemaid led her to the back of the house. "Your room is this way, ma'am." It was a makeshift room next to the pantry. No windows, a mattress on the floor. Lucille wasn't prideful, but that hurt. She was the groom's mother, yet she looked like a cleaner who'd been mistakenly invited. In the kitchen, while getting some water, she met Martha. Martha was the cook, a woman with deep-set eyes and a warm smile. Brown-skinned, hair tied back in a floral scarf, calloused hands, honest gaze. "Do you need anything, ma'am?" "No, just a glass of water, and you can call me Lucille." The two women shared a look and a smile. A few minutes later, Lucille met Martha's son, Peter, a 7-year-old boy in a wheelchair, bright, sensitive, and full of life. He drew robots and airplanes with colored pencils, even if he couldn't run after them. Lucille was enchanted. She spent hours with him, helping with toys, telling stories. There, in that little corner of the mansion, she felt alive. She felt useful. She felt seen. In the days that followed, the mansion filled with flowers, lights, rehearsals, and luxury. But Lucille was constantly left out. At meals, she wasn't invited to the table. During family meetings, she was ignored. When choosing the wedding photos, they asked if she could not be so visible in the pictures. We're going for something a bit more elegant, you know? One of the bride's aunts explained. She nodded, politely smiling, but inside, each word felt like a chisel carving into her chest. Elliot didn't notice. He was always busy with rehearsals, vendors, and fittings. But Lucille didn't blame him. She believed he just wanted to please everyone. She had raised him to be kind. She just hadn't expected him to be blindly kind to the wrong people. It was the day before the wedding. Lucille, alone in her tiny room, was ironing the dress she had made. A simple design with delicate lace on the shoulder. She had spent the past few weeks stitching it by hand. Every stitch a thought, every fold a wish to see her son happy. She stepped out of the room to use the bathroom, passing through the hall where the final floral arrangements were being set up. In the hallway, Lucille came face to face with Meredith, Allison's mother, who stopped and looked her over from head to toe. "Is that your dress?" "Yes, I made it myself. I thought the blue—" Meredith let out a short, venomous laugh. "It's not appropriate. You're the groom's mother, not the event's waitress. You do realize there will be important people there, right? Senators, CEOs. Maybe it would be better if you watched from the television, dear. It would be less embarrassing for everyone." Lucille felt her face burn, but before she could respond, a shadow appeared at the end of the hallway. Elliot. He had seen everything. He stood still, frozen. His mother hadn't seen him. In shock, Elliot stepped back and hid behind the wall. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to say. But something inside him started to crack. That night, Lucille wrote a note. "My son, I don't want to be a burden or a source of shame. I wish you all the happiness in the world. With love, Mom." She left the folded letter on the bed, packed her bag, and left in silence. The sky was overcast, the road was empty, and her heart was heavy. But she would rather leave with dignity than stay in a place where she was only met with disdain. Elliot found the letter just before getting dressed for the ceremony. He read it in silence and cried for the first time since he was a teenager. He ran through the house, checked every room, the kitchen, the entrance. Nothing. Marta, eyes brimming with tears, said, "She left, said she didn't want to embarrass you." It felt like something exploded inside him. Elliot looked around. The flowers, the lights, the altar with his name, the fake smiles, the empty words. And he understood. He was about to marry a woman who never truly saw his mother's soul, and into a family that had never known what respect meant. The music began. All the guests stood. Allison walked in, radiant in white. Elliot stood at the altar. The ceremony began. The priest took a deep breath. "Elliot Carter, do you take Allison Lancaster to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Silence. The wind swayed the flowers. Allison smiled, confident. But Elliot remained still. "I don't." A murmur swept through the hall like lightning. "I'm sorry, but I can't go through with this. I can't share a life with someone who looks down on the person who loved me the most in this world. You humiliated my mother, the woman who raised me alone, with love, with sacrifice, the woman who hand-washed clothes so I could have a new notebook, and who now left in shame for simply being who she is." He dropped the microphone and ran out of the ceremony, his heart pounding in his chest. Elliot found his mother sitting on the porch at home, head down, looking sad. "Mom!" She turned around, surprised. "What are you doing here, my son?" "Doing the right thing." He ran to her, held her in his arms, cried on her shoulder like he used to when he was a child. "Mom, forgive me. I'd let them treat you like nothing, but you're everything, and I'll never let anyone forget that again." Lucille, with tears in her eyes, smiled. "I just wanted to know if people would respect me without knowing about the inheritance. Now I know." And then she told him about the will, about the 95 million, about the silence she had kept. And the two of them smiled together, not because of the money, but because of the truth. Time passed like a warm breeze at the end of a summer afternoon. 3 months had gone by since the day Lucille left the country mansion with a shattered heart, but also with a soul finally free. Free from silence, free from the pain of pretending not to see, not to feel, not to hurt. For the first time in a long while, she walked with her head held high and steady steps. Beside her, Elliot had changed too. The young man who once lived in the shadow of his girlfriend's status and others' approval now seemed to have found his own voice, his own worth. But Lucille knew she had a greater mission, and that mission began with a name: Marta. From the very first moment she met the mansion's cook, Lucille felt a different kind of connection. Marta was a strong woman, but the sparkle in her eyes hid a silent exhaustion. The burden of caring alone for a paraplegic son, without resources, without support, without rest, was something Lucille knew well. Because for years she had also struggled to raise Elliot with the little she had. That's why, even before thinking about herself, Lucille decided her inheritance would not be an end, but a beginning. With the money carefully saved, she sought out the best architects, engineers, and health professionals. But the project did not originate from a drawing board. It was born from her memories, from the longing for the elderly man she had cared for with so much love, from Marta's pain, from a child's smile, from the sincere desire to do something that would change the world, even if it was just a small piece of it. The chosen location was an old abandoned school on the outskirts of town, a forgotten land overrun by weeds and neglect, but in Lucille's eyes, fertile. It was there that she would plant her flag, not as a millionaire, but as a woman, a mother, the caregiver, and a dreamer. The process took weeks. The first visits to the site were emotional and challenging. The place was in ruins, broken windows, a collapsing roof, walls covered in graffiti, but Lucille was not afraid. She saw beyond the rubble. To her, every crack told a story, and every story deserved a new chapter. Elliot dove into the project with the same passion as his mother. He quit his job at the marketing agency and began studying accessibility, inclusion, and social project management. For the first time, he felt he was doing something that truly mattered, something that came from the heart. "Mom," he said one day, sweaty from carrying bricks with the volunteers, "I used to think money was power. But now I see that real power is knowing what to do with it." Lucille smiled, moved, with paint-stained hands and a heart free of resentments. When the Hope Institute opened its doors for the first time, there was no pomp, no spotlights, no media coverage. There were only people. People who needed help, people who helped, people who believed. In the entrance hall, a simple plaque read, "Everything we do with love transforms." Marta was the first guest. Lucille personally went to her house, now knowing every detail of her struggle. When she arrived, she found Marta sitting on the floor, holding her son, trying to make him laugh with a broken toy. "Marta," she said with a choked voice, "do you have a minute?" "Of course, Lucille, but sorry for the mess. I wasn't expecting anyone." Lucille approached and knelt before the child, who looked at her with curiosity and a slight smile. "His name is Peter, isn't it?" "Yes," Marta replied, surprised. You remember? I never forget the eyes that silently ask for help. Lucille then told her about the institute, but she didn't just tell her. She put in Marta's hands a proposal that she would be responsible for the institution's cafeteria with a fair salary, days off, and support, and more, that Peter would be welcomed by the rehabilitation center with access to physical therapy, occupational therapy, and quality neurological care. Marta burst into tears born of years of exhaustion, sleepless nights, whispered prayers in the dark. Why are you doing this for me, Lucille? Because one day someone believed in me, and now it's my turn to believe in you. The news spread through the community like wildfire. Families who once had nowhere to turn began seeking the institute. In no time, dozens of people were being cared for. Children in wheelchairs, single mothers, unemployed fathers, all found there a place where they were not treated like numbers, but as human beings. And it was in this setting of rebuilding and new beginnings that Elliot met Melanie. Melanie was a volunteer physical therapist. Brown hair tied in a messy bun, serene eyes, and an almost silent sweetness in the way she spoke. She didn't seem to care about status or appearances. Instead of makeup, she wore smiles. Instead of high heels, worn-out sneakers on the clinic floor. "You're the founder's son, right?" she asked one morning while organizing the cushions in the physical therapy room. "Yes, I am," Elliot replied, a little embarrassed. "And you're the lady charming everyone around here." Melanie laughed. "Charming? I can barely carry the kids in my arms." "But it's the way you look at them, as if you see beyond what the eyes show." They laughed together, and there a friendship was born that soon became something more, different from anything Elliot had ever experienced. Melanie didn't care if he was rich or wore designer brands or what car he drove. What enchanted her about him was the way he knelt to talk to the children, the way he looked at Lucille with admiration, the way he smiled with his whole heart. "You've changed, Elliot," Lucille said one afternoon when the three of them were in the Institute's garden. "You too, Mom. Or maybe you've always been like this? I just didn't have eyes to see it." Lucille looked at the two and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: belonging. For the first time, she was not treated as the caregiver, the poor one, the invisible. She was seen, heard, loved. At the end of that year, the Hope Institute held its first big community event, an inclusion fair with musical performances, workshops, free care, and activities for people with disabilities. Marta prepared the entire menu with her team. Peter, now with more mobility thanks to physical therapy, danced with other children in a simple but moving choreography. Lucille cried from beginning to end. During the event, Melanie took Elliot's hand and led him to a quiet corner of the garden. I wanted to show you something." She took a small notebook out of her pocket. Inside were sketches of ideas, a training program for atypical mothers, a proposal to expand the therapeutic space, a volunteer training project. "I want to stay. I want to be part of this. Your life, your mother's life, this place." Elliot held her face in both hands and kissed her, a gentle and passionate kiss. "You're already part of it, and I've never been so sure of that." That night, as the Institute's lights went out one by one, Lucille was alone in the garden. She looked at the sky, thought of the old man she had cared for, thought of all the sleepless nights, the humiliation she endured, the times she wanted to give up. And then she smiled, because now she knew the true value of the inheritance was not in the millions of dollars, but in what she had done with it. She planted hope, and the world quietly began to blossom around her. 6 months had passed since Elliot and Melanie's wedding. The country house where the two lived was now a home filled with life, the scent of lavender, and genuine laughter. Lucille, although quietly present, visited her son often, helping Melanie tend the garden, sewing little clothes for the baby soon to grow inside her womb. Yes, Melanie was pregnant, and the news had brought Elliot to tears, his heart flooded with a joy he never thought he'd feel. For the first time, the word family made sense. Not a family of appearances like Allison's, but a true one, built on care, empathy, sacrifice, and love. But the past rarely stays buried. It was on a rainy October afternoon, when Elliot was returning from a medical appointment with Melanie, that the unlikely happened. A luxurious black car pulled up at the entrance of the property, and with an expensive umbrella in hand, Allison got out, visibly thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes, pride shattered in every gesture. Lucille saw from the window and froze. Melanie squeezed Elliot's arm. "Do you want me to ask her to leave?" she whispered. Elliot sighed deeply. "No, let her be. I need to hear what she has to say." Melanie went inside, leaving the two alone. "Elliot," Allison murmured, her eyes watery. "I know I'm the last person who deserves to be here, but please, listen to me." Elliot crossed his arms. He was no longer the boy who lowered his head before injustice. His expression was now firm, shaped by the scars of rejection and contempt, but also strengthened by the choices he made with his heart. "What do you want, Allison?" Allison hesitated, lowered her eyes, her voice trembling. "My life has become hell since that wedding. My mother, she took me out of the company, said I embarrassed the family by being exposed. My father kicked me out of the house. Even my friends disappeared. And I thought of you. I thought about how strong you were. And I realized I wanted to be like you, deep down. I wanted your truth, your courage. I wanted to try to fix everything." Elliot took a deep breath. His heart still remembered the pain Allison caused, but also the pain Allison inherited from that cold and cruel mother. It was a cycle of poison. "What do you expect from me?" he asked. "That you let me be part of your life again, that I can get to know you, respect you, and admire you, not for what you have, but for who you are." Allison's eyes filled with sincere tears. "I swear, Elliot, I am a different woman." Silence fell like a sword in the air. Elliot hesitated. He felt pity, but he remembered Melanie's voice, his mother's presence in the hardest moments, the public humiliations he suffered at the hands of that same woman. "I found true love, Allison, and I learned to love myself too. You were part of my past, yes, but my future, that's with someone who never turned their back on me." Then he walked inside the house and closed the door. But fate still had one more reckoning to come. The following month, the charitable hospital built by Lucille and Melanie was completed. It was called Hope House, in honor of all the mothers who raised their children alone, without support, without money, but with dignity. And at the grand opening event, the whole town was invited, including the Lancasters. No one expected Meredith to show up, but she did. Dressed in white, wearing the same towering heels and the subtle arrogance that had always accompanied her, but there was something different about her. Her eyes were empty, without sparkle. The Lancaster family name was in ruins in society. The press had uncovered financial fraud in the company following Allison's departure, and Meredith now carried the weight of social decay like a stone on her chest. She stopped in front of the stage where Lucille was giving a speech, with Melanie and Elliot by her side. Everyone saw her. A murmur swept through the hall. Lucille saw her, and silently, she descended the steps, walking toward the woman who once tried to destroy her. "You don't need to be here, Meredith," Lucille said, her voice firm but calm. "I came from myself, not to ask for forgiveness, but to understand how a maid got so far." Lucille looked at her for a moment, then she smiled, with a compassion that surprised everyone. "Because I never did what I did to be accepted. I did it for those who loved me when no one else did. And because I knew true love is worth more than any surname." Meredith swallowed hard. The audience stood up, and in a spontaneous act, everyone applauded Lucille.
It was the final humiliation for the Lancaster matriarch, not by cruel words, but by being defeated by the greatness of the one she considered insignificant. That same day, Allison returned, but not to beg. She came to give. She transferred her personal savings to fund scholarships for young people in the community who grew up like Elliot, invisible, underestimated. It was her way of apologizing. Lucille welcomed her, and, for the first time, embraced her. Sometimes mistakes teach us more than successes, but it takes courage to admit it.
Years passed. The Hope Institute expanded. New units were built in other cities. Lucille received honors, awards, interviews, but she continued serving soup, sitting beside the children to tell stories and comforting tired mothers with a hug. In every room of the Institute, she saw the reflection of something greater than money. She saw dignity being restored, families finding hope again, and children who once lived limited now rehearsing their first steps with support devices and hearts full of joy. It was in that space, born from a story full of pain, sacrifice, and silent courage, that Lucille rediscovered herself. She was no longer just an unlikely heiress to a millionaire fortune. She was now a mentor, a caregiver to many, a source of comfort for distressed mothers, just as she had been for Marta, the cook, who in times of scorn had extended her hand with a sincere smile. Elliot, for his part, found himself in a new phase of life. Suffering had shaped him, but true love was what refined him. Alongside Melanie, his partner in life and in the Institute's causes, he rediscovered the value of simple things. Together, they cared for the most fragile patients, offering physical and emotional rehabilitation. Melanie was everything he didn't know he needed: gentle, sensible, kind. And more importantly, she saw Lucille not as just any mother-in-law, but as a magnificent woman who deserved all respect and admiration. It was moving to see the three of them together in the corridors, smiling at patients, sitting on the floor to talk with children, planting flowers in the courtyard garden. Nothing was done for show. Everything was given wholeheartedly. The fortune left by a man who had been ignored by society found in Lucille a worthy destiny, and she knew how to use it wisely, without excess, without vanity. With every wing built, every prosthesis donated, every volunteer physical therapist welcomed, Lucille was building something greater than buildings. She was building a legacy. One day, a local reporter wanted to interview Lucille. She asked if she ever regretted keeping the fortune a secret for so long, and if, in some way, that hadn't been a risk. Lucille smiled, and her answer was simple. I needed to see who was genuine. The world teaches us to judge by appearances, but love, care, respect, they don't pretend. I didn't want to be the rich woman everyone treated well out of interest. I just wanted to be Lucille. And now I am, proudly. On the main auditorium wall of the Institute, a phrase was engraved in large letters. True wealth is who you choose to be when no one is watching. And there, in that simple phrase, was condensed Lucille's entire journey, from an underestimated caregiver to the guardian of a legacy of love and dignity. And maybe this story will make you reflect too, about how we treat people, about what really matters, about the value of those who have nothing and yet give everything. And if this kind of story touched you, moved you, or made you think differently, follow our channel. We have many more stories like this, full of twists, deep lessons, and above all, hope. Because in the end, what really remains is what we build with the heart.